That was America's own judgment, 3 months before the bombing began. The war was fought against it. And this is what it was really about. Not a country, a room cut into a mountain under solid rock that nothing has ever seen through. So the United States tried to settle it the only way left, from the air, with bombs built to reach that far down. And then came the strangest part. 7 different people looked at the same 3 sites in the same week and produced 7 different answers about what was left. 12 days. Iran's government counted 1,060 dead. An independent monitor counted more. A year on, nobody has been able to check. No inspector ever got back in. And that tells you about access, not damage. 2 questions, only one has an answer. 12 days in June. It starts 3 months earlier. Once a year, every American intelligence agency signs one combined judgment for Congress. In March, it said Iran had built a weapons program once, shut it down in 2003, and never restarted it. 2 parties looked at that and refused it. President Trump rejected the finding of his own agencies. Israel's government said the opposite, that Iran was close. Neither has ever shown the public what it was reading. And a war does not need evidence to begin. It only needs someone willing to act. The thing they disagreed about would fit in the boot of a car. Iran's entire 60% stockpile, made solid, is a cube about half a meter across, under a third of one shipping cylinder. Scale is not danger, but it changes what you picture. And enrichment is not a straight road. Reaching 60% is not most of the way. It is very nearly all of it. The last stretch is short, which is why that number frightens people. What the curve cannot say is whether anyone was walking it. None of this was happening in silence. America and Iran had been talking for months, indirectly, through intermediaries, 5 rounds of it. A 6th was set for the 15th of June, and both sides had agreed to be there. It never happened. Months earlier, an operation was already inside the country. Explosives, drone parts, short-range missiles, built on Iranian soil and placed beside the very air defenses meant to stop an attack. But look closely, none of these markers is a place. No position has ever been made public. Which raises the obvious question: how does anyone know? It comes from one place: Israeli briefings, given after the operation, relayed by analysts careful to say they were passing it on. That does not make it false. It means the only body who can confirm it is the one who did it. So the war began with 2 claims that could not both be true. One said there was no weapons program. The other said the threat was almost here. Only one of them acted, and acting is not the same as being right. It is only the thing that makes the argument academic. 3 in the morning, Tehran time. The Israeli military says about 200 aircraft crossed into Iranian airspace. Their figure, not an independent count. The corridors have never been released, so these lines show direction and nothing more. They came in 5 waves over 3.5 hours. By the end of the first day, the reported total had passed 100 targets, but only the sites somebody else could verify are marked here. The full list has never been published. Natanz is where the war stops being a claim and becomes visible. From orbit, the above-ground plant, the substation, the power building, the generators, all reported destroyed. But the markers sit on measured change in the image, not on anyone's list of what was hit. and the part that mattered was untouched because it sits underground. What was observed is that the strike cut the power. What was assessed, by analysts, not by anyone who looked, is that centrifuges at full speed would tear themselves apart. Nobody has seen them since. By that morning, the war had moved from buildings to people. 4 of Iran's most senior commanders were dead. The chief of the general staff, the head of the Revolutionary Guard, its central headquarters commander, and the general running its aerospace force. Iran replaced all 4 within days. Alongside them, scientists, 6 of them on the first day, by Iran's own account. Weeks later, a far larger figure reached the press from an Israeli official nobody has ever named, and Iran has never accepted it. One of the 2 men shown here had run the country's atomic energy organization. The other was a physicist. Neither was a soldier. Israel's justification that day was that the strikes were preemptive, that Iran was approaching a weapon. 3 months earlier, American intelligence had said the opposite. Intelligence can change. Neither side has shown the working. That evening, Iran answered. Ballistic missiles and one-way attack drones fired at central Israel under an operation it called True Promise 3. Where they were launched from has never been made public, so what you are watching is regions, not sites. By the second night, it had come back to the capital. The Israeli military said it hit more than 80 objectives in Tehran alone. Objectives, its word, not targets. Close and not the same. The positions were never released, so this shows spread, not places. In Tamra, a missile found a house. The people inside were a family. And then the target list stopped being about the nuclear program at all. A fuel depot northwest of Tehran burned for 5 straight nights. The inspectors told the Security Council what they could and could not see. 2 workshops they had been inside, destroyed. Radiological effect, none. At Fordow, nothing they were aware of, which is not the same as nothing. By day 3, the killing had reached the people who collect the secrets. The head of Revolutionary Guard intelligence and his deputy were both dead. Neither post stayed empty for long. The same day, in Bat Yam, a missile brought down part of a block of flats. Later, a missile came down on a hospital roof in the Negev. 71 hurt, none badly. The wing had been emptied days earlier. The guard said it was aiming at a headquarters next door. Whether it did is not established. And that was the day the 6th round should have happened. Iran called it off. Whether it would have changed anything is unknowable, but it is the moment diplomacy stops appearing in this story at all. By the end of the 3rd day, Israel's own count had passed 170 targets, and in the same breath, 700 military components. 2 different units. At Petah Tikva, it was a tower block with hundreds of homes around it. Israel assessed it had destroyed about 1/3 of Iran's missile launchers. Sit with that for a second. 1/3 of a number nobody has ever published, and an assessment nobody outside has ever checked. Iran appointed a new wartime chief of staff to replace the one killed on day 1. Within days, he was dead as well. The sourcing names the job. It does not name the man. Put the week together, and the pattern stops looking like a target list. This was a chain of command being dismantled from the top and then held down as each replacement stepped up and was killed in turn. On the 17th, President Trump posted 2 words, unconditional surrender. In the same run of posts, he claimed complete control of the skies over Iran, a combatant's claim about its own performance, which nobody outside was in a position to check. He also wrote that Iran's supreme leader was an easy target and that the United States would not kill him, at least for now. 4 words doing a great deal of work. The qualifier is his own. Then, Iran did something to itself. It cut the country off from the network. For 2 days, almost nothing in or out. 90 million people unable to reach each other or anyone beyond the border. The monitors who tracked this had seen nothing on that scale since the protests of 2019. And that matters for longer than the 2 days it lasted. Everything the outside world knows about what happened in there had to travel through that connection. Close it, and the record thins. And this one never filled back in. 5 days in, every one of them had carried strikes, deaths, and claims nobody could check. 7 days were still to come, and the war had not yet reached the mountain. Israel said it destroyed 8 attack helicopters on the ground. 8, not about 8, but no location was given, nothing was published to show it, and no independent body confirmed it. A number that precise sounds counted. Counted and confirmed are different words. While all this was happening, India was quietly flying its own people out of both countries. 3,500 from Iran, 800 from Israel, and with them a handful of Nepali and Sri Lankan nationals. Nobody in that queue had chosen any of it. On the 19th, President Trump said he would decide within 2 weeks whether America would join the war. A fortnight, named out loud, in front of cameras. Remember that, because it matters shortly. That same day, the heavy water site at Fordow was struck. The reactor there was still being built. No nuclear material in it, so nothing radiological came of it. The inspectors first reported the plant beside it was untouched, then revised that. Watch what just happened. The record corrected itself in public. Next morning, a barrage came down on Holon. Everyone trapped under the rubble was out within 2 hours. Ramat Gan was hit in the same salvo. That frame is empty because this film holds no photograph of it. And each one of those had to be met by something built far slower than it was fired. There is no scale on this chart because the inventories are secret. Inside Natanz, the inspectors reported contamination. Uranium spread through the facility, dangerous mainly if it is breathed in. Beyond the fence, Iran's own measurements found nothing at all. 2 readings of one place, taken by 2 parties who do not trust each other. At Rehovot, the target was a science campus. The institute counted about 45 laboratories badly damaged. Nobody has audited that count. At Haifa Bay, the target was an oil refinery. The company priced its losses in the hundreds of millions. 3 of its staff did not come home. Only one of those figures was published precisely. 6 more structures went down at the Nuclear Technology Center, the 3rd time that site had been hit. The picture is older than the war. And then, at 1 minute past midnight in Missouri, the American part of this began. What followed crossed an ocean, a sea, and most of a continent. The formation split. One group went west, out over the Pacific, in exactly the wrong direction. The others turned east for Iran. That the westward leg was flown as a decoy is on the record. Whether it fooled anyone is not. Isfahan took more than 24 cruise missiles fired from a submarine. And this is everything the public can see of the result. The same ground, 5.5 weeks apart. That they were fired is established. What they reached is not. He had given himself 2 weeks. The decision came in 2 days. Whatever the deliberation was, it happened over a weekend, and 12 of those 14 days never ran. Which is why this operation carries 2 dates. In Missouri, it was still the 21st. In Iran, it was already the 22nd. 7.5 hours between them, and both dates are correct. This is the Pentagon's own slide. Notice the red track. It reaches one site only, and that one was struck from the sea, not the air. Their timeline puts the missiles first. Around those bombers was a package of 125 aircraft. This footage is all the public record holds of any of it. Now, the measurement this film has been holding back. The published depth is 80 to 90 meters, but 80 to 90 below what? Measured from the ridge, the hall sits well above the portal. Measured from the portal, the rock overhead is nearer 200. The figure everyone repeats does not say which. Hours later, from the room where they had watched it happen, the verdict was already absolute. The next morning, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs reached for a smaller word and put a qualifier in front of it. Israel's own military landed short of that, and the satellite record cannot referee it. At this resolution, this is a month of different light. 4 accounts spread the whole width of the question, and not one from a neutral party. One adds the sites were emptied beforehand. Every count that followed was a count of holes in a roof, read from imagery far sharper than this, and still the holes are underneath it. On the 23rd, the strikes reached Evin Prison in Tehran. Impacts were documented more than 500 meters apart inside the complex. This was not one hit. 2 counts exist for what that killed, and they have never been reconciled. The dead were not only prisoners, staff died, and so did visiting relatives. Two human rights organizations, working separately, called for the strike to be investigated as a war crime. Human Rights Watch also documented what happened to the prisoners moved afterwards, mistreated, and some of them disappeared. 2 governments, 1 set of victims. No court has ruled on any of it. Strikes fell across all 12 days. Only one of them is dated, located, and verified down to the hour. Which was the worst, nothing found here can say. That evening, Iran hit back at the Americans directly, around 14 ballistic missiles at an American airbase in Qatar. And here is the strange part. Warning had been passed hours in advance to both governments. A retaliation announced before it arrives is doing something other than trying to kill people. What followed sounds like 4 contradictory claims. It is not. One counts what was stopped, one counts what got through. One explains why that one was allowed through. One describes what it did when it landed. Different questions, 18 days apart, and none of them disputed that nobody was hurt. The president called the response weak and thanked Iran for the warning. Look at the ladder. Every rung had been climbed except the last one, and nobody climbed it. That this was deliberate is an inference, and it stays an inference. Just after 6 in Washington, he announced a ceasefire, and in the same breath gave the war the name it has carried ever since. Everyone uses it now, including this film. The name came from one of the people fighting. Except it wasn't. By Israel's own account of that morning, strikes in Tehran, a barrage that killed 4, the hour the ceasefire was meant to begin, and 2 missiles after it. Those 4 died in Beersheba, in a residential building, at 20 to 6 in the morning. They had an hour and 20 minutes left. "7 in the morning is Israel's hour," from Israel's own statement. The other 2 faces are that same instant, converted. Iran disputed that it had begun at all, which makes the hour itself contested. And the disagreement has a width. Israel said Iran fired after the line. Iran disputed where the line was. Israel struck a radar site near Tehran in return. Whether any of that broke the ceasefire depends entirely on whose clock you accept. On camera that day, the president lost his temper with both of them. This film does not quote it. The words were never the point. The point is that the party brokering the ceasefire attacked both sides in public and then leaned on one of them in private. By the statement that closed it, the ceasefire took effect at 7, 12 days from the 13th of June to the 24th. And from that morning on, whatever anyone disputed about how it started, it held. Iran's own foundation for the war dead counted 1,060. An independent monitor counted more, and did something Iran never did. It separated civilians from soldiers. How many missiles Iran fired was counted 3 times by organizations with no stake in the answer. Between 500 and 550. Different windows, different methods, and nothing that says which of the 3 is closest. And what got through is the one figure in this entire war where 2 methods nearly meet. Israel's interception rate implies 70-odd. Ground-confirmed impacts give 50 to 60, 20 missiles apart, and in this record, that counts as agreement. Defending against them cost about a quarter of Israel's interceptor stockpile, a stockpile whose size has never been published, which makes even the quarter an assessment rather than a count. The money runs to billions by outside estimate. The replacement time runs to years. Every precise figure in circulation is somebody's inference. 2 days after it ended, a preliminary assessment leaked, set back less than 6 months. The defense secretary called it preliminary and low confidence. 2 months later, that agency's director was fired. These things happened in this order. Then, on the 2nd of July, Iranian lawmakers voted almost unanimously to suspend cooperation with the inspectors, and the inspections stopped. That line is where the evidence in this film ends. Everything you have been told about the inside of those sites was learned before it, and nothing has been added since. The legal position went backwards too. The European powers triggered the snapback, and the sanctions lifted in 2015 came back into force. 6 resolutions, some of them nearly 20 years old, live again from the end of September. 10 years of diplomacy, and the paperwork returned to where it started. Which leaves the object all of it was about. Nobody has weighed it since before the strikes. The agency says it is still inside the damaged sites. Others say it was moved out beforehand. Neither account has been checked, and nobody outside Iran is in a position to check either. And the mountain is still there. Whatever is left of the hall inside it, no satellite resolves it, and no inspector has been in. In March, American intelligence said Iran was not building a weapon. In June, Israel said it was. A year of evidence later, that argument is exactly where it started. "12 days, a toll nobody can state precisely. 3 questions still open. That is not a gap in this film. It is a gap in the record. This film took months. The research, the sourcing, the maps, every figure checked against the record. If you want more of it, subscribe. That is what makes the next one possible.